Welcome back to CryptosRUs. I'm George. We're all George. So the U.S. market is closed today, but anyways, the show continues. It's regardless if the U.S. markets are open. There's a lot to talk about. So let's, of course, talk about Bitcoin coming back up above 20,000 once again. And there's a very important rule I want to share, and you really can't lose if you follow this rule. All right, let's get started. Smash the like, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell to get notified of all my streams. Follow me on social media and check out CryptosRUs.com. And lastly, don't forget to follow the brand new CryptosRUs Clips channel. Good morning, guys. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I started after market open, but it didn't open today. But that's okay. That's okay. Like I said, there's a lot to talk about. Of course, the big news right now is Bitcoin back right above 20,000, 20,600, right? So there were plenty of buy opportunities at 17, 18, 19, right? Did we find that true bottom? Well, not going to call it just yet because this week has not started. We have to see how this week is. But again, there is one strategy, basically, that you really can't lose out on. But I'm going to talk about what that is in a little bit. But seeing how the U.S. markets are closed, let's see how European markets are doing. Well, right now, they're doing pretty good. And above average. Okay, let's just say. They're all in the green, but not super rally mode or anything like that. But European markets are higher right now. Of course, this week, though, still, starting tomorrow, we will see if the S&P 500 and NASDAQ recovers. Because, honestly, right now, there's still a lot of fears about recession. I just saw a Peter Schiff interview where he talks about, we might be going in depression. I don't think that's the case, but it does seem like there's a circulating cycle, right, that's started to be talked about, and that is all these very, very, very aggressive rate hikes to try to curb inflation, and this is done because the economy seems to be strong. But what if the economy is no longer strong and inflation is still high? What do? You have no option. So the Fed, in this case, aka Jerome Powell, will have to decrease rates later on this year and may have to spit up the money printer once again. But what do you do if inflation is still high at that point? Well, does that mean inflation is going to keep going up, right? Quite possibly. So there's a lot of talk about this endless cycle now that may never break due to what has happened in the last few years, right? So we'll see. But obviously last week was obviously a horrendous week. According to this, the S&P 500 logged its worst weekly performance since March of 2020. That was when the COVID crash happened, right? So we will see what happens this week as the markets digest the 75 basis points from last week and how it's going to digest the 75 basis point that's coming next month, right? That's 1.5% right there within a very short amount of time. So this obviously is still leading the way in terms of fear. But one, I think, good thing, I saw this about housing. I've been pretty negative on housing because I'm like, I just don't see how housing market can sustain when the 30-year mortgage is now above 6%, 6.28% for a 30-year mortgage, right? But according to this article, even though the housing market may come down a little bit, price may come down a little bit, it's very different than 2017, the housing bubble. And that's because banking regulations or how approvals for mortgages are done makes it a lot safer and there's less risky loans, at least according to this. So for example, how many people that are utilizing an ARM, which is adjustable rate mortgage, which is very, very important because a lot of them refinance, right, to lock in lower rates, and some of them are forced to do so. There's only 2.5 million versus 13 million from 2007. So just an example how the housing market is stronger now than before, but I still have my doubts on whether or not the housing market can really hold on, seeing how the stock market has sold off like 30, 40, 50%, and crypto sold off, and literally everything else sold off except real estate. So let's see if real estate can hold. All right. So I want to lead off with those things, just some macro stuff. What about Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is back above, can't speak this morning, 20,000. I did look at liquidations, and right now it's looking good because we're seeing a lot of short liquidations. You can see clumps of it, right? So over here, quite a lot. Then over here, quite a lot, like 100 million. Over here, another 60, 70 million. And over here, another, 30 million, right? So we're seeing clumps of short liquidations, which is definitely helping us get back to basically 20,000, right? Hopefully we see a lot more of this. But again, there are times where it doesn't matter which direction the market is going. You go see liquidation on both sides, like case in point here, right? And who are the winners? Who are the winners when you get a whole bunch of liquidated traders? The exchanges. So basically, you're helping exchanges get rich off of your liquidations. It's really that simple. Exchanges will collect their fees no matter what, while traders try to outsmart the market. And you could see, even with this decline right here, right, you would figure only longs would get liquidated. No, the shorts got liquidated too. So this is why I've said stay away from stay away from leverage trading. Let's just put it that way. All right. Now, I did see this from CZ, and he was not the first one to post it, but he did retweet it, so I thought this is relevant. Documenting Bitcoin posted this chart. If you only read Bitcoin news headlines, and CZ chimed in on it saying, well, historically speaking, if you bought Bitcoin, every time there's a Bitcoin is dead headline or obituary, you have done pretty well. So this is the one strategy or the rule that I stated in the title, and it's pretty much it. If you look at this, there's tops and bottoms. There's always corrections. And whenever there's corrections and major corrections, like the one we just went through, there's always going to be naysayers that's declaring Bitcoin is dead. I mean, that interview I talked about with Peter Schiff, half the interview was about how Bitcoin is going to zero. And he's been saying that since 2011. Okay, he's like, well, Bitcoin still has no intrinsic value. It's gonna go to zero. There's still $1 trillion basically in market cap for all of crypto, so you still have to wait for that to go to zero. So there's always gonna be people that declare Bitcoin is dead, and headlines and media will declare just for the clicks and views. But that's when, generally speaking, when you see headlines or massive amount of headlines, or aka fear, right? The fear index being pretty low these days. Generally speaking, that's when you win. That's when you buy. You buy low and then you sell high. It's really that simple. There's no magical formula other than to buy low and sell high, and of course, having patience and holding, right? Things that I've been talking about and things that I've been following for many years. Now, what else is there? Well, besides Bitcoin, many people took advantage of altcoins, right? I've said yesterday, a lot of the altcoins started coming up and Bitcoin dominance started coming down. So here's a good chart about top L1s and their rebound in 24 hours, right? Of course, most of these sold off massively. So now, investors are DCAing, buying the dips. And you see Ethereum, Avalanche, Phantom, Polygon, Solana, Tezos, Kronos, BNB, Near, and Celo, right? They're all having pretty good 24-hour bounce, right? And if you update it even more, right? I mean, still pretty good overall, right? At least for the last 24 hours or the last 48 hours. But it goes to show you that despite all the negativity, but despite all the fear, there are still many investors still left in the game, still taking advantage of the cheap prices that we're presented with, right? Which is why these have done relatively well within the last 24 hours. But I do think that this week will be a telling week. I created a video yesterday about a crucial week. I think this week will be very, very crucial in determining whether or not, right, Bitcoin will continue on or may hover around here or may even go below, depending on how markets react this week. If there's a brutal sell-off once again, it's definitely going to affect Bitcoin. But some of the things that were driving Bitcoin down last week seems to have alleviated a little bit this week. And I'll get to what I'm talking about in a little bit. Min says, hey, G-Man, my girlfriend always wanted the... I'm not going to say it. How do I satisfy her? You'll have to figure it out or watch my stream with her. Maybe that'll do it. And then there's one saying, the mighty mustache saying, people getting wrecked out there, but we chilling here. So that's good. All right. Now, what else is there? Well, if you're in South Korea, I don't think I have many people watching me from South Korea. But if you are, this is fantastic. South Korea just delayed its 20% tax on Bitcoin, right, until 2025. First of all, there's a couple great things about this. Bitcoin tax only limited to 20%. That's awesome. That should be in the U.S. too, right? U.S.'s capital gains, I think, is 25%. But you know what? Yeah, so this is even better. You have less, and you don't have to report it until 2025. That's fantastic, right? But again, tax situation is very different across all countries. There are some countries you don't have to declare any tax, like Dubai. You don't have to declare any tax on capital gains, right? Or Puerto Rico. But yeah, not in the U.S. Not in the U.S. All right, what else is there? Let's see. Super Google, Fear and Greed Index was higher than now. When I bought ETH at 100, I started accumulating BTC at low 20s. Keep DC until next halving. Congratulations. And this is a point I made yesterday about the Fear and Greed Index. Yes, even though it's a good indicator of overall fear out there, but the metrics, the indicators that comprises, or let's just say the indicators it uses to make up for the index score is a little bit outdated. And things now in 2022 is a little bit different in 2018. So it's not like the end-all, be-all gauge that is 100% accurate. Just throwing that out there. All right. What else is there? Celsius is making headlines, but not good headlines. Even CNBC is talking about Celsius. And we still don't have any more clues about this. At this point, everyone's just assuming that the worst is going to happen. But they released another blog article, and basically this is saying the same thing. It's like the only thing they said differently is this process will take time. And what process is that? The process of stabilizing their liquidity and operation, right? So that's pretty much it. No other update. Hopefully it can end well, but this is one of the things I was talking about. Like last week drove a lot of FUD. This week, it's almost like it's assumed that they will not be able to survive this anymore, right? But the big question mark is whether or not they survive. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is, are users going to be able to take out their liquidity? Are their funds still safe or pretty much gone, right? That's the big question mark. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Can you talk about the sell short squeeze trending all over Twitter? What is there to talk about? If there's a short squeeze, it's driven by whales, and you definitely don't want to be participating in it because you'll be stupid if you do. So really not much to talk about. And these days, I don't spend any time on Twitter. Twitter has become so toxic and basically irrelevant. So I tried not to stay on Twitter. So there's way too many bots that could be used to drive any information up or across, the network, and it's just like, yeah, whatever. So whatever's happening with sell tokens, don't participate in it because you will get burned. It's not being short squeezed due to some good news. It's short squeezed because a whale or whales are trying to manipulate it and cause more people to get wrecked. So stay away. Stay away. What else is there? ByBit was famous for their leverage, is reducing the workforce by as much as 30%. So every exchange is kind of struggling at this point. I take that back. They're not struggling, but they're trying to prepare for the worst. So they're proactively cutting off their workforce, and ByBit is also doing that. Do you think Solana expanding NFTs on OpenSea will help with their constant problems? No, Jack. The two doesn't relate at all. That's like saying if Celsius starts selling NFTs on OpenSea, somehow it's going to help with their liquidity problem. No, it won't. And Solana's, their issues with their blockchain has nothing to do with their NFT marketplace or growing number of NFTs. Let's just put it that way, Jack. Something else, South Korean authorities banned Terra's main designers from leaving the country, so the investigation is ramping up, although I think Do Kwon is still hiding out in Singapore. So I think the main guy they want is Do Kwon, but I don't know who else are the main designers. So, but things are escalating. What else is escalating is this. I talked about this and how basically this goes against DeFi, goes against basically removing a centralized entity. I talked about Solend. Basically, there's one gigantic whale that took out a huge $100 million loan, and they staked in a tremendous amount of Solana. And it's so much so that if they get liquidated, if Solana happens to drop to 22, they will get liquidated, and the whole ecosystem can't handle it. Not only will Solend pretty much go belly up, but it's going to cause a massive, massive sell pressure on Solana. So Solend thought it was a good idea to come up with a DAO proposal to take over the account and make sure that it doesn't get liquidated, and basically they control it, right? And then people found out, well, that's not a good idea, but it was voted yes anyways. And you know why? Because there's one whale that owns 90% of the votes, right? So if you have one whale that controls 90% of the votes, then it's not really decentralized, right? So again, this person could decide whether or not these DAO proposal goes through. So after receiving such negativity over this proposal, they decided to come out with a second proposal to invalidate the first proposal. And guess what? The whale that owns 90%, well, he was basically going to say, screw that, I'm going to vote against it regardless, but somehow he changed his mind. So the second proposal went through and invalidated the first one. But it goes to show you that even though you want to have like a decentralized voting system, a governance system that's ruled by the people, you just don't know if the founding team or some whale owns more than 50%, then every vote is going to go to that, go with that whale or whoever that owns 50%, right? So you just got to be careful sometimes. But it's not a good look for Solend or for the decision making, I guess, right now. So it is what it is, I guess. Just going forward, after you live through like the correction we're going through right now, you tend to look at projects differently. So when I was still, back in 2021, when I was reviewing a lot of the projects, going through them, I was more critical about the team, right? And many people would argue against it, saying, well, there's a lot of unknown team members, a lot of anonymous members, that has projects that have done well, right? So you shouldn't put so much weight on it. But I always put a lot of weight into it because I've seen how, new founders, unseasoned founders, or unknown teams, right? They tend to screw up, and during bad times, that's when things come to light. So just got to be careful. One of the things that we had to learn from this after we recover and things go back up is to evaluate the team, and I think put a heavier emphasis on them so that in the future we don't see more things happening like right now. All right, that is pretty much it overall. Better day today than yesterday or last week. So let's see if it's going to continue. All right, let's do some Q&A. Sean, I remember when we were waiting for 20,000 for GeorgeCon in Vegas. Now that Bitcoin hit 20,000 again, can we find that GeorgeCon? I'm still trying to plan it, but I may have to remove it from Vegas because requirements from the hotels are no good. So I don't know if I'm gonna have it in Vegas anymore. I may just have it somewhere else. So still planning it out, but most likely it's gonna be next year, early next year. Jerry asked earlier, when you take gains, do you set aside the tax for money? Okay. When you take gains, do you set aside the tax money or reinvest it? I have Doge, didn't sell it at all because of short gain tax. Yeah, you should always have money to pay taxes. Unfortunately, one of the things I've learned in the past, and I've heard from people, is, for example, let's say last year, by December 31st, many people were still way up in the green, right? But they didn't set any money on the side. So by April, when things started coming down, right, things started turning red. But you can't just deduct off anymore. You can't subtract off your capital gains from last year. So a lot of people were kind of caught in that situation. So that's something I've learned in the past, to make sure you have enough cash to pay taxes. So regardless if you have a market downturn, you'll be okay. You're not forced to sell your crypto at a loss, right? Smoke ETH every day, asking about Sol. You know what? I still think that they have a chance to turn things around. Despite all the FUD that's going out there, and some of it caused by themselves, Anton and team being very cocky towards other projects, and them making statements how Bitcoin needs to move to proof of stake and stuff like that, despite their network keep going down. Again, a little immaturity, but I think overall they have a good chain. A lot of believers in it, a lot of users, a lot of backers. So I think they will still continue on. They'll gain strength again and still be in the top 10 going forward, right? Can they crawl back to number 7 or 5 or something like that? Yeah, I could see that happening. They're probably not going to be nearly as strong as they once were back in 2021, but I think as for the big L1s, they're going to continue to be the big L1s, and hopefully, they will figure out how to stop all these network outages. And every single one seems to be attributed to bots or spam attacks or DDoS attacks, something like that, right? And they were talking about implementing fees, because they are feeless right now. They were talking about implementing fees to kind of stop that from happening. Maybe that'll help. Is there any FUD on USDT? Yeah, there's a lot of FUD on USDT. USDT had FUD since 2017, since its creation. Basically, Tether was created to help iFinix, which is the parent company of Bitfinex, to recover their lost funds. If you look at Bitfinex is an exchange that should have gone under like years ago. But they keep releasing new tokens, and somehow they could get buyers to buy into them. And unfortunately, it has worked, right? So their last token was Leo token, and Leo is still at number 15. And the only reason why they created Leo token was because a lot of the tether that they borrowed for free with zero interest was being held by some foreign bank. So I mean, and then they created Tether because they lost a whole bunch of money into a hack before or something like that. So I mean, it's just really their I don't know, their start story, I guess, their beginnings is very iffy, right? But since then, people still wonder whether or not they have enough funds to back this. Do they really have funds? 68 billion locked into account. So there's a 67 billion, 68 billion withdrawal. Will they really be able to withdraw, right? We don't know at this point. How much will BTC be when Celsius and Tether fall? If Celsius falls, I don't think this would be too bad. Tether falls, it's going to be horrific. I don't know what that's going to do. How can Celsius still give weekly reward yield? I don't know. They should just stop that at this point. There's no point of continuing giving out yields when you can't withdraw, right? Maybe use that to stabilize liquidity, like what they're trying to do. I don't know. I don't know what they're trying. I guess it's just too little, right? Trying to band-aid up a huge gaping hole on the bottom of a barrel is not going to do it. So they need a big liquidity injection, and I'm pretty sure that is what they're trying to work on right now. Did you see the news about Bored Ape Yacht Club? Richard, I actually didn't. What did they announce? I actually didn't see it. Tether are hiring a top 25 auditor. The fund's going to be caught with them. Rohit, I don't know what you're asking. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, this whole situation. Well, like I covered with Kevin O'Leary yesterday. He said something that's important. That every single big correction we go through, you have one big player at least that goes under. Okay, and that's because these big players, they became big because they highly leveraged during the good times, and during the bad times, the bad decisions that they've made comes to haunt them, and then they go belly up every single time. I still remember in .com bubble, I think the big bubble was Pets.com or something. They raised the IPO 40 million or something like that, and they just like went under because they actually had no sustainable business model. Right in 2008, of course, Bear Stearns went under, and then it caused a cascading effect. There's a lot of big guys that just go under during bad times, right? Obviously, we had one with Terra. Not a good situation. Now we're starting to see it with Celsius. We saw it with Three Arrows Capital, right? And there could be many others. So it's kind of like these bad times weed out the bad actors, basically, right? But once they do, once they're out, then the whole ecosystem can recover. When do you see the next rally happening? Things will get darker after July 28th? I don't know. Just like some of the previous bottoms, After they happened, no one believed they were bottom. Everyone's still sitting on the sidelines waiting for a lower low. But many of those bottoms, when they happen, it's just a slow recovery. Sometimes you hover at the same point for a long time. And then eventually you just start trending up little bit, and then regain, right? We might not see like a V-shaped recovery. Most likely we're not going to see it because the economy right now is still weak. There's still a lot of fears about recession and rate hikes and stuff like that. So most likely we're not going to see a V-shaped recovery. But if this 17K was our bottom, right, we could just be hovering here for a long time. It could just be going sideways for a long time. So that's why I think this week will be a telling week. What happens with Bitcoin and the whole ecosystem this week? Will we continue to hold and continue to trend upwards, or are we going to see a little bit more weakness back down to 17K? I think this week will give us that indication. What's up with Voyager Digital bailout? I don't quite understand what that bailout is all about. They got a $500 million injection lifeline, which is like a loan basically, right? Does that mean that they're already out $500 million, that they need it? I don't actually quite understand what is that's doing. I guess they're trying to, because I'm thinking because they loaned out a lot of the crypto for their yields, right? They're afraid if a bank run happens that they can't recover all the funds that they lent out. So I think that's what the $500 million is going to be used for. In case people withdraw, they could use that $500 million to pay people out. I'm thinking that's the case, but they haven't really explained why they need it, other than to like balance liquidity. But what does that mean exactly? I think that's what's happening. Carl, I'm removing coins from exchanges, but Ledger doesn't support many low cap alts. Where can these tokens be stored? You have to use multiple wallets. There's no one wallet that supports every coin. Yeah, sometimes you have to use their own native wallet. Sometimes you could use a mobile wallet, universal wallet, right? You have to spread it out because there's no one wallet that gets everything. Yeah, Solend. I think I don't know. People are getting confused, but I'm seeing the comments. Solend is its own dApp on Solana. It has nothing to do with a team. Okay, but the problems with Solana, of course, still exist with the network and having so many network outages. But Solend themselves, a different team, a different dApp, right, making some very poor decisions right now, right, and plus this whole controversy with one whale that controls 90% of the votes. Who is that whale? Most likely one of the founders, but they're staying anonymous, right? Like, who else would buy up 90% of the tokens, right? It doesn't make any sense other than one of the owners, one of the co-founders, right? But yeah, I mean, it's just, that situation is not looking good too, right? The whole point of a DAO, whole point of DeFi is to be decentralized so that people have a vote, right? But we are seeing with Solend, that's not the case. Same thing with Terra. The reason why we have Terra 2.0 is because the Luna Foundation Guard held more than 50% of the votes. That's why it was proved so easily. Of course it's going to be approved when you're holding more than 50% of the votes, right? So, yeah. So sometimes you just gotta be careful with the projects you're involved with, because some of these things come to light later on. All right, guys. I'll let you go. Overall, Bitcoin is doing pretty darn good right now. Above 20,000 once again. So the scariness of 17K behind us, possibly. But I think this week we'll see for sure. But overall, some good stuff happening. But there's also a lot of fear. But the way to get through this is by holding strong, having patience, holding, DCAing, and according to this rule, basically, when you buy when others declare Bitcoin is dead, generally speaking, that's a pretty good time to be buying. All right, guys, smash a like, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys tonight, 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. All right? Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.